think the most important thing is that people's reactions to your art are true. They happen. How you choose to change and adjust the art based on those. Bill Hader had a really great quote. When somebody tells you that something isn't working in your script, they're right. But then when they tell you how to fix that part, they're wrong.
Hey, welcome. Thanks for listening. This should be the last of the Friday special episodes for a while. It is a lot more work doing 2 episodes a week, so I think I will throttle back. I have a few episodes already in the can that I'm really looking forward to sharing those. Eric Canetti, Kayla E., Carrie Nord. I mean, the list is pretty long. So stay tuned. Today's guest is Brennan Wagner. Brennan was on the podcast, maybe 2.5 years ago. And he's done so much since then. That was sort of mid-pandemic. He's living in New York City. Since then has moved back to Portland, and he is living the life, I guess you would say. We recorded this 2.5 weeks ago, and it was following another live YouTube show supporting the Rogue's Kingdom comic book that Brennan is coloring. We had talked just 3 days before, so we were, it almost felt like we were like, wait, where are we? What are we doing? And we refer back to that. And this was done in a time when the campaign was at around $9,000, but now they have funded, but they have a slew of killer stretch goals. So if you haven't already pledged to the Rogue's Kingdom campaign, go check it out. James Robinson has written an amazing story. I was fortunate to get to read issue number 1, and, he's back, and he's doing this amazing fantasy, and it's different. And Jeff Johnson has pulled all the stops out in his art for this. It is mind-boggling the amount of work he's put into this. And Brennan just ties it together with this beautiful bow. So go check it out. I can't wait for my copy. I'm such a shill. Anyway, we talk about his current project, St. John, with Dan Schade, and the master edition of Grendel Devil by the Deed with his pop, Matt Wagner. And, listen, Matt's amazing. And Grendel is one of my favorite books of all time. So anytime like some new stuff is coming out, it's always great to check it out. And it comes out, I think, this month from Dark Horse. Brennan talks about another project. It's like a 6-page comic that he wrote, drew, lettered, colored. Like it's all him, soup to nuts. I've seen it. It's great. I don't know. Go check it out. He talks about it in the episode, and I think he'll be posting stuff about it soon enough on his Instagram or wherever you can find him. So yeah, this is me with Brennan Wagner. Look at you with all the rose paraphernalia. Beautiful.
Yeah, man. I'm all about those roses.
You're all about the flowers. I like it.
Here's an official St. John t-shirt.
I love it.
Got a little St. John logo down here.
I thought you were going to show me like your underpants going official St. John underoos.
That would be great. I would wear those every day of my life. Good luck.
What do you think the buy-in rate for the current comic book fiend Kickstarter crazed audience, if you could bring underoos back for, adults?
I think they'd have to be pretty spectacular.
He could be Iron Man again.
Yeah. Oh man, that'd be awesome.
See,
I would be the Phantom. I'd want like all purple.
just which you already do. You could already do that. You don't need official underoos for that.
No, yeah.
Well, long time no see.
Yeah. What was this? A couple days ago?
Just a couple of days ago. A little fuzzy. The campaign's doing great. Well, I guess a framework for anybody who's not paying attention what's going on. You are coloring the Rogue's Kingdom series for James Robinson, and Jeff Johnson. So that's kind
Correct.
of a cool undertaking.
Yeah, and we're only like 3 days in, I think, and they're
$9,000.
Oh, dude, we're almost there.
I know, and I think I said to, I don't know who I was talking to, I mean, if they make a push, man, they could double that number. Like they could totally double the number. So
It's funny. The number is almost arbitrary these days, right?
For sure.
Like my dad's Kickstarter that he has set to go on the 24th.
Yeah.
That Kickstarter, they just put an arbitrary goal, financial goal on it of $666.
Nice.
Because it's a Dracula campaign.
Sure.
And they'll hit that within the first fucking 5 minutes, but then whatever you get, because I'm sure in their heads they have some actual number they're trying to hit.
Well, I'm sure they have a recoup number that they need to hit, and then from it, and then beyond.
Yeah. Again, I mentioned it during the drink and draw for the Rogues Kingdom thing. Their Kickstarter, it's a combo with Dark Horse.
This is like the new model. Like the new model is the Kickstarter, but I think, is it similar to what Oeming does? Because like Oeming puts out his fantasy series and then it goes to the stores with the image icon.
Oh, then yes, that's what they're doing. They're kickstarting probably. It's sort of like what we're doing with Rogues Kingdom. And I don't want to speak prematurely, but I believe there's the intentionality that Rogues Kingdom gets picked up by a different publisher.
I would think.
I'm pretty sure James and Jeff told me they're talking to Image. So
yeah,
but I don't want
to step on anyone's toes.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what's going on there. I just color the book.
There you go. Play dumb. That's the way I always do it.
Yeah.
I'm just a pretty face here. I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
That's always been my motto. That's cool. But let's get into the really important stuff. How was your fishing season?
Oh,
oh no.
No. Because of all the comic book projects, not enough time to fish.
Yeah.
This summer and this fall, which are pretty prime time fishing conditions for Oregon, which is where I live, Oregon. Of course, St. John, Portland, everything I do is in Oregon. The fishing season and the fishing season was terrible this year, especially for salmon. I don't know if you've been reading about this, but Oregon is now facing what they're calling like a catastrophe, like fishing season, where suddenly the numbers are so low for salmon fishing, commercial salmon fishing, which affects our fishing too when we're just on the river. The numbers are so low this year that the mayor, the governor, they just asked for aid from from the wildlife fish and game of America sort of thing. Again, I'm paraphrasing the hell out of this, but it's like the numbers were so low for salmon this year that it's officially a disaster. And apparently over the last 3 years, so the salmon fishing has been so low. The numbers, last season I went out steelheading and I caught one steelhead for like 50 trips out on the river.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, so that's really thin. Or you suck, one or the other. Well,
steelhead fishing is like fishing for a unicorn.
Yeah.
It's typical that you'll get one in Oregon. You'll get one every like couple trips. It's not the kind of fishing where you go out expecting even to get a fish. You're excited to get one. It's like a unicorn.
Sure.
They fight so hard. It took me 20, 30 minutes to land the thing.
Yeah. Well, they're tough. They're a tough one.
Yeah. Especially on the fly. I do all fly fishing. So
sure. Right. Harpoon. Let's see how they do with the harpoon.
That's like what they used to use, man. The Oregon natives, they used to use hooks that looked like big harpoons, these giant things on the end of lines, on the end of like nets. It's pretty fascinating how they used to catch salmon around here.
I guess there's a big difference between when you fish for pleasure and you fish for, I don't want to die.
Oh yeah. Yeah, survival. I'm actually all catch and release, so I don't even keep fish anymore.
Right. So like for you, it's purely just, an entertainment process, to get with nature and kind of do the thing. And it's fun. I'm the same way. I'm catch and release. I've always been that way. I don't really care about the fish as much as like the activity of doing the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, hell, you can go to the store and get like the same quality of fish caught like that day or the day before from your local, wherever. And I mean, especially in Oregon here, we have like, I can drive 5 minutes to a seafood market that's across the bridge right over here. It's so close to where I live. And they have fresh steelhead caught in the river. That's like steelhead they get in the market there are humongous. So way bigger than steelhead that I caught last year. It was like, I want to say it was like 50 plus inches. I mean, it was humongous. It's just giant fucking thing. And so thick around you, like it looks like a tuna steak when you
right.
when you fillet it up,
I remember seeing those bass tournaments, and then you hear about the people who like cheat by like shoving stuff down like the bass's gullet for the weigh-in, just to like.
I've not heard of that. That's fucked up.
It's totally screwed up.
That's fucked up.
Anything to get the trophy, I say,
There's always people cheating the system. I just watched a video about camel competitions in the middle, like camel trophy camel raising is a huge thing over there.
Yeah.
And the grand prize for the best in show camel competition is close to like $60 million.
Wow.
Can you believe that? Like, it's crazy.
It's so crazy. I mean, and you run into this all the time, but it's so interesting how self-selecting we are as a country. And I'm sure every country's this way, but like everything's like, why, like we think everything that we do is the way that everyone else should do it or does it around the world. And yeah, of course they have camel competitions because that's what they have. They don't have horses or, they don't go steelhead fishing, because they don't have that, but they have other things. And those other things are just as exciting and entertaining.
The reason I saw the article is because there was a record number of camels that got expelled from the competition because of hormone injections, muscle stretching. Like apparently the process to get your camel into one of these things is bananas. They get x-rayed, they get their blood tested, they are inspected by a professional, like just crazy, man. Crazy.
I love it. Makes me want to watch Lawrence of Arabia again. It's like my favorite movie.
Oh, it's a great movie.
It makes me so happy. There was, I guess, Zach Davidson was saying something similar. I read today that he was talking that, as sort of like, as like, we're so cool about our comic industry, like it's the minor leagues compared to like the manga industry, like in Japan, like how they're paid and treated. Like it's a very different world.
And what does that mean? They're paid and treated well?
I think they're treated like it's better. Like it's a bigger business over there per capita.
Hey, it's a bigger business here, so that makes sense.
Yeah, right. And but it makes you like kind of think like correct me if I'm wrong. If from your sort of information, like I think we've created comic properties that are probably the biggest in the world as far as comic book properties, like that are known. Like everybody knows who Superman is, right? Like everybody knows who he is.
Yeah, and yet DCU and MCU are actually, when you look at like franchise monetary value, they're actually pretty low on the totem pole compared to like Ninja Turtles are above them.
Sure.
The most successful franchise of all time currently is Pokemon.
Right. Not a comic, but
Yes, a comic.
Was it a comic first?
I want to say it was a comic before it was even a TV show.
I don't want to say either because I don't know.
Yeah, I remember seeing one back in the day. It's old, but I mean, it was a video game first. That was the first thing was a video game.
Okay, so I mean, I'm talking straight up comic book. I mean, but yeah, I mean, listen, the video game is a completely different monster. It's the biggest thing out there. There's nothing bigger right now in entertainment than video games and Taylor Swift. I think those are the two biggest things in entertainment, right?
Yeah, but we're talking fiction. Yeah, I want to say MCU is like 14 billion, 15 billion. Pokemon is like 75 billion. Like it's
Crazy.
so much higher than MCU and DCU. And Ninja Turtles is sitting at like 40, 50 billion. So like, it's crazy like which franchises, it's so hard to guess, right? What's going to do the best?
It's funny. I don't play video games, but I remember.
I also don't play video games.
Yeah, when I first saw Pokemon, and I'm like, oh, you know what? Like, it would be really cool if they made like a gaming like sphere that you could have, and then you could give half to your friend, and you had the other half, and you could play whatever characters, like whatever the Pokemon battle characters were. Like, to me, that was a no-brainer. Like, Alex and Brendan could play each other their favorite Pokemon thingamajigs against each other, but it looked like that little sphere that they have in the cartoon. I was like, that seems like a thing, but I've never.
You mean the Pokeball?
Sure, the Pokeball. Yeah,
You're talking about a Pokeball.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up, during in the 90s when the Pokemon craze like first hit. I was about fifth grade, so end of elementary school, going into middle school. That whole like kind of era was that's all I did with my friends. We would hit the recess schoolyard, whip out our Game Boys, connect them, battle ech other. That was
nice.
That's what we did, and then we'd rush home to eat a bunch of snacks and watch Dragon Ball Z. Like so much anime. And what's interesting is I actually don't watch or indulge in any anime now, unless it's like the new Miyazaki film attracts me. But like,
yeah,
for the most part, yeah, I made that transition ultimately, mostly from the influence of my father, whose studio I'm in right now.
Oh, okay.
That's what you're seeing, all this Grendel spirit shit around me.
Man, I just thought you were just keeping up the family honor there by putting all that stuff around.
No, that's one of his Eisners right
there. There it is. Tickling.
So yeah, for me it was like the anime was really influential because it taught me all these like shortcuts to storytelling. Mm-hmm. Anime, I think, is phenomenal for that, teaching you how to make shortcuts visually for storytelling.
Yeah,
especially action-based storytelling. And then ultimately, like the anime kind of like bled over into American cartooning and American animation. I mean, some of the most influential stuff on me now is like Batman animated series, or like any of the animated superhero stuff from the 90s, the X-Men show, the Spider-Man show, the Justice League show, Superman show. Man, I love that stuff so much. The Fleischer cartoons, which Pop had me raised on, were really big for me. A number of those episodes like they live in my head permanently.
They're like fine art of cartoons. Like if you look at those any of the Fleischer animation, it feels like you're looking at fine art, and that like I don't know, 16 seconds of Winsor McKay animation, like all that stuff is like feels like fine art now in retrospect, like for how gorgeous like the effort was that they put into that.
That's a good relation there that they bring up with the Winsor McKay animations from back in the day. They are very similar to those Fleischer ones. There's that fluidity there, and a hand drawn aspect and a textured sort of old school look to it that's really always been very attractive to me.
Yeah, no, it's gorgeous stuff. And it's, because it's kind of interesting if you think about it, like when I think about like having seen your coloring work and your illustration work, like I look at that and it's very much in that wealth of painterly sort of world. It's not coming from sort of flat cell animation kind of feel. It's very strong in that sort of like there's dimension to the color that you're putting in there, like the weight.
Yeah, and for me, I don't really get to draw that much or paint that much because I'm always coloring other people's work.
Right.
And now with St. John, I'm writing and coloring.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very rare these days that I get to like draw and paint, but I'm getting to do it more often. If you'd like, I could screen share and I could show you the piece that I started in the Drink and Draw for Jeff's for the Rogue Kingdom campaign. I'm just wrapping it up now, so it's just at the end. I believe I started it during that, so I was kind of laying in some flat tones.
Yeah, we can share that. You can share that with me later. Since now I'm completely audio, it doesn't matter anymore. You could have worn your Hawaii 5-0 T-shirt for all for the video.
All audio. Oh, okay.
I like just to have a picture of your voice in my mind. But it's because I mean, like, you were kind of like when we first talked. Dude, and it's like over 2 years ago, like when we first chatted, which seems like a million years ago now.
Yeah.
Like you were like, I mean, it's so interesting how you color, because it's kind of very different than a lot of other people I know who color. Like you're really like approaching it in a painting fashion. Like you have things flatted like everyone else does because you have to stay within the lines, so to speak. But how you are directly affecting that layer versus doing something and then having some sort of effect applied to that to put over that layer. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I always talk about this. I make a lot of marks. I think mark making is one of the most indicative things about comic book art and about two-dimensional art is the best art to me is art that keeps making marks, keeps making the right marks. So if you're an artist like Alex Toth or like my artist on and co-writer and best friend on St. John, Dan Scotti, you're making minimal marks, but you're making the right marks. But it is all about making marks. And so when I'm coloring, I'm thinking very much in that line. I believe I sent you St. John to read, and I hope that your listeners are checking out St. John, the book that is I creatively own St. John. So I'm quite invested. And St. John, I color very differently. I don't know if you notice, I color very differently than the way I color, for example, my father's art or Tim Sale's art or Chris Mitten's art or Ben Stenbeck's art. I've colored so many people over the years. And, with a lot of them, I was experimenting with texture, with mark making. These days I'm trying to go with someone like Dan, with someone who kind of is inspired by Darwin Cook, by Bruce Timm, by those animated series I was talking about from the 90s. With someone like that, I'm always trying to figure out how to pair my mark making with their mark making. I think that in the color stage, you want your marks to sort of reflect the marks that are being made by the line artist. With someone like my father, there's texture there, even though there's also a clean line aspect. There's a lot of noise and texture in the shadows. And so I'm always trying to figure out how to add just a little bit of texture into his work to make it kind of match the line art. With Dan, everything's very clean, round brush. So when I color St. John, it's purely round brush, purely flat. I'm trying to figure out how minimal I can go, how flat I can go. And I'm not very good at coloring comics completely flat because my OCD fucking ass is just always making marks. So with St. John, I'm trying to figure out how to leave as many things flat as possible to match the art, the line art. And as in general, as a colorist, I think you're always trying to sort of match the energy of the line artist. What are they laying down? Are they a hatch artist? Are they laying down a ton of marks?
Yeah.
Are they the kind of artist who is very clean line and minimal and has a lot of white space? If there's a lot of white space, you have to think about your coloring differently than if they're like a Frank Miller type artist and they have a lot of black space. The black heavy artists like you mentioned Oeming earlier. Oeming, I think in my head I think of as a black heavy artist. He spots his blacks really well, and when he does that, you can always see the areas of light because they're the areas that aren't inked. And so for me, I'm always trying to spot that and figure out what is the best approach to this. It's hard when you're taking on a lot of projects as a colorist because you'll take on this and that. I just did a thing with Kelly Jones, for example. Coloring Kelly is very different than coloring literally anybody. Because
sure.
Kelly is so
you could Kelly, Dan, and Jeff are three very different artists in terms of like how you would approach coloring them. And that's so, you know, it's so interesting you say that, because I don't think I thought, I mean, like I do, you do the, it's like the comics, slot machine, like, cause you have a penciler, an inker, and a colorist. They're your three slots in your slot machine. And you kind of like, pull the lever and see who gets who, that kind of approach. And you always, coming from the penciling side of it, my mind goes, oh, I always like to see who would be inking so-and-so drawing. But then I think about like in the coloring aspect now, very much opposed to, coloring 30 years ago, the work that you do as a digital colorist now is so different than what was done so long ago in the terms of, the mark making. Because you didn't really get the opportunity to do as much mark making unless it was a prestige format where you could paint. But the thought process, like for you to have to like approach these three different artists in completely different mindsets.
Yeah, you picked a good trio of variety there.
Well, you picked them. You said yes. But it's like
I'm an opportunist when it comes to work, man. Sure, so I said yes because the paycheck was in front of me. But
for sure. But it's super interesting because we don't like I think we just think, oh well, somebody does the thing that they do and that's that. But it's not so much. Sure, you could totally do that, but like I love using music metaphors, and I'll cite my my all-time favorite guitarist being Eddie Van Halen. Love Eddie Van Halen. Broke the rules when it came to playing guitar. But every time I hear him play songs with other people that's not the band Van Halen, he sticks out like a sore thumb because he's doing his thing. And not everyone around him is on board for the thing that he's doing. And not saying they're against it. It's just they don't know how to play along with that or how to make it fuse in. And you go, oh, that's different. So like if you were like, I only color it this way, it would be, this is the Brennan effect you get on here. But the problem is that wouldn't jive with every type of art, black and white artwork that comes across your Wacom. So.
Yes, correct. That's a good example to bring up. Yeah. And you're talking about collaboration ultimately here. You're talking about like art that is not done in a vacuum. That's not done solo.
Right.
And comics are almost always a collaborative effort unless you're someone awesome like Jeff Smith. Most people, my dad included, are people that are doing collaborative efforts. Even on the Grendel series that I'm coloring right now with him, it's a new Prime series. We have it slated. I won't say when it's slated to come out because it keeps getting pushed. Grendel keeps getting pushed, but it's
sometime in the future, near or far, we're not sure.
Sometime in the future, in November, we have a Grendel book dropping that is just absolute aces. Any of your listeners that like Grendel, please go out to the stores in November and get, I want to say it comes out like early November. So hit the stores late, like mid to late November. And that is a redux of the Grendel Devil by the Deed story that Pop did back in the day. We redid the whole book. The original is only 30 something pages. This one sits at 120. Entirely new art, drawn and colored by me, drawn by Pop, colored by me. The writing done in that same style where it's, chunks of text. Every page is this gorgeous, like sprawling spread. None of it is typical panel storytelling. It's all very inventive and creative.
Oh, cool.
That book in November is one of the coolest things I've worked on in the last couple of years, frankly.
Yeah.
And it's been a long time coming. It hits in November here. But the next series we're doing too, the next Prime series, he's writing and drawing that, and I'm the only other collaborator, really, the colorist. I guess the letterer too, but we just kind of trust the letterer most of the time these days. It's very rare that we adjust stuff. Dan and I will adjust stuff on St. John because we're like control freaks about St. John. So like we'll ask for certain things here and there. But for the most part, yeah, Grendel lettering comes in and it's just banging usually every time. For the most part, it's just him and me collaborating. So I'm just coloring stuff that he's already worked out. And in the case of coloring, Grendel, for him, I'm like very much his assistant is
right.
how I think of it. Like I'm not trying to interject what I think the story is supposed to say at this moment or that moment. I'm not trying to form this dialogue about what's happening. It's more like he tells me what's happening.
Right.
And I try to interpret that the best I can. And then when he has a corrective note, it's always the correct note because he's the creator, not me.
Yeah, he's the composer. So, this is how you play it.
Yeah, and anytime I've ever argued the point, I was wrong. I'll just say that for your colorist listeners out there, check your ego at the door. Because like coloring a comic book is so assistant work. It's so collaborative, you know. Only with St. John, where I am also the writer, is it different. Otherwise, yeah, like when you're coloring a comic book, you're trying to help because the inks, you know, black and white, such a strong contrast, the strongest there is.
Mm-hmm.
So like the story tells itself without you as a colorist. So like, what are you going to add? How are you going to make it better or palatable in the color stage? And I think that's always a matter of focusing on what is most important per panel, what's most important per page, what's most important per book, just figuring out like what are the narrative beats and where is the emphasis and the focus. Everything else is just background noise. Everything else is just, you know,
set dressing.
Dressing, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because this isn't a film.
It's delineation. Like, I mean, I remember when I got into the business, I did some coloring of my own work early on. And I always thought about it as a delineation. Like, how do I clarify what the artwork that I'm putting out is saying? Like, where do I want the reader to be focusing on? And you said something really interesting. And I guess it was sort of your mentor who kind of led you in that idea that, you know, every page should have one panel that is like the focus panel. And then every panel should have one element within, which is a focus element, right?
Yeah, and I'll just give him a shout out again, like I do at every interview practically. That's Dave Stewart, who is I think he's the best colorist in comic books. His work inspires me so much. When I'm in a rut, I'll just pick up a book that he's colored and I'll just start looking through it to understand. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's right. The focus is here. The focus is there. Color plays a role. Contrast plays a role in drawing your eye to that thing. You know, lighting. If you're trying to draw the focus to certain characters, hit them with a bunch of light. Yeah. Give them minimal shadow, or vice versa. If the background is bright, hit them with a bunch of shadow so they pop. They always need to pop. Every point of focus needs to pop somehow. And that's always dependent on what subject matter is in the panel. So like for any panel that has eyeballs, I always bring this up. Eyeballs are the big one. Eyeballs and human faces. We look at faces more than anything else.
Sure.
That's why painting the human face has always been kind of the be all end all, or the human form, face form, anything like that, because we're trained to look at human beings. We look at human beings more than anything else. And particularly we look at the eyeballs. So I'm always like thinking about how the eyeballs are your point of focus. Anytime a character is talking, it's that little glint in the eye. It's that little mm-hmm. white spot in the eye. That's what does it, because otherwise, like, who's to say what somebody's going to focus on? Are they going to focus on the beard or the hairline or the structure of the nose? You can guarantee everyone is going to their eyes are going to go right to the other eyeballs, and they're going to go to faces, human form. If there's an object that's supposed to be in focus, it should have a lot of detail. If it's a physical object, something that's inanimate, because your eye always wants to go to the animated stuff, to the live stuff. So, yeah. You know, if you want to draw the eye to an inanimate object, it better have a lot of contrast, a lot of detail. It better be center stage, right in the middle.
Yeah, well said. I agree. Speaking of pop, let's talk about your pop for a sec here. And I think about, like, most everyone doesn't grow up with somebody who in the arts and follows them in the arts in that sense, because we usually kind of rebel and go the opposite direction, or something to that effect. And did you have a period of rebellion, or were you always sort of like, I really want to be in this? Because, your dad fills some big shoes, and it's interesting to see how you have, sort of carved a space into this industry. Did you, like, reluctantly say, okay, fine, I'll do this?
No, it's, I guess the answer is sort of nuanced, little half and half. Growing up in pop culture, I think you'll see this in actors and movie stars too. Their kids kind of gravitate and are like into that as well. There's something about pop culture that is extremely attractive to a kid. Your imagination's running wild. Um, we all long for that when we're reading material and watching material. It's all nostalgia based. It's all trying to get back to when you were a kid. And so for me, I was extremely impressionable. My
Mm-hmm.
sister doesn't do any of this, but of course she loves pop culture. She loves watching TV and film and reading things, like, because it's really hard to just completely ignore how wonderful pop culture is when you're surrounded in it as a youth. And I always was. I mean, I used to be pulled out of school to go walk convention halls and help run my father's table. I remember a few San Diego Comic Cons that were just unbelievably cool, where I got to be a part of like everything he was doing, including all the con activities and post con activities like the Dead Dog Party. So I've been going to these sort of things my whole life, and it was sort of inevitable that I would be involved in art form in some way or another. I dabbled with other stuff in college. I think that's really important when you're getting out of high school, when you're leaving the nest for the first time. You need to experiment with other art forms that you are not as stellar at. Most artists leave their high school and go to college, and they feel kind of cool because they're suddenly, I don't know, top of their game, riding this wave. But it's really easy to just take courses that are within your wheelhouse. And I think it's really crucial to sort of drift outside of that a little bit and experiment with other stuff. For me, it was photography and sculpture.
Oh, cool.
So I loved doing sculpture because there was a real sense of like carving out this thing that I was doing already when I was sketching and drawing with pencil, trying to figure out anatomy. I think sculpture is crucial for anatomy. Anyone listening that's going to school or is about to go off to college and wants to draw, take sculpture classes, especially life sculpture. The human form is everything in comic books. So you need to know your anatomy, even if you're going to cartoon it, even if you're going to simplify it, you need to know it. And photography was a big one for me. I just like, I get kind of the zoomies when I sit in my little studio space here. Like I'm getting them right now. Like I get the zoomies where like after a few hours of work, I got to go outside for a bit. That's why I fly fish. I play tennis and basketball. I like to go running. I lift weights. I have to like move my body at a certain point because there's something weird about, I think, creativity when you're just in that chair for too long, absorbed in this micro universe. You have to go experience the tangible, real universe. And photography was that for me. So I did a lot of photojournalism in college. That was mostly like my local, my newspaper, my college newspaper would ask me to like go do, an event. And I would take my Nikon. I would usually take a tab of acid, and I would just go like kind of have this very, tangible, down to earth experience. And I always took that back home and would end up drawing that stuff. In college, I did a lot of marker drawings based on my photography. So I was always like drawing from life and taking what I was seeing around and like then drawing that and like learning anatomy and learning structure and form and color and contrast, all that through the lens of like a real reality. So I think it's crucial to get outside and again, like just experiment with another form of art making. I mean, I in college I dabbled with fucking everything, man. Took a theater class and a film class, and like I tried all of it. Ultimately, I really liked photography and sculpture, so I did a ton of that. But there was a point in my life where, I realized that the ability, and it was honestly conventions, and I'll throw out Steve Siegel, great writer, Steve Siegel, who has partnered with my dad on a number of projects, including Sandman Mystery Theater. Steve, who officiated my wedding, Steve one day looked at my portfolios and he said, you have an eye for aesthetics and composition, 2D structure. Your photos look great. Your drawings look great. But anyone can take a photo. And very few people these days, especially these days, can draw.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's almost a magic power in it. Your ability to translate through your eyeball into pen, ink, into on the paper with mark making. That is, it's rare and it's something not to be lost. And it sets you apart. And it was him telling me that and sort of getting that impression about walking around cons. You walk around cons these days, it's all merchandise. There's very few artists or comic books anymore at Comic-Con. These things are cosplay con and pop culture con and franchise con now. Mm-hmm. And there's a real talent there to be able to, I can see it when I sit at a con and just start remarking issues for people, when I just start head sketching for people. It's like a magic trick. They're blown away by the ability of somebody to simplify and break down these forms and be able to represent them very quickly with a pen. So ultimately, I had to kind of gravitate back towards the comics and just decide, finally this is what I want to do. But I think there was some rejection going on initially, me wanting to maybe try something less like dungeon dwellery. Again, the problem that I find with comic books, like comic book making, is there's a lot of like dungeon dwelling. So yeah.
I know. I was super fortunate for a big chunk of my career that I had a great apartment in Manhattan, and I had my drawing table was right on the north window facing uptown. It was perfect. So I wasn't in a hole. I had beautiful light. I had a beautiful view, which made life good. But to that point, I rarely left my apartment because I was stuck there doing all this work for, ungodly hours of the day.
I lived in New York for 3.5 years and I had the exact same experience. First of all, I felt like I could never afford walking out my front door.
But you sort of lived in my old neighborhood, kind of just south of my old neighborhood. I was on 50th Street and off of 10th Avenue between 9th and 10th.
Oh shit, that's like a few blocks from where I was, man. I was 42nd and like 12th, basically.
Yeah, you were super close to New York Comic-Con.
Oh, like literally 2 blocks away. Yeah. The con was really easy from my apartment in New York.
Super easy, yeah.
But the rest of life was very difficult because it was, first of all, the price of just eating or living is insane. Mm-hmm. But then also, like you were saying, you spend all your days up in this apartment and there's you walk outside and the streets are like more apartment. Like it's just a bunch of like concrete and more humans. And again, I'm a big nature guy. Growing up in Portland and Oregon is so, everyone who lives here has the same sort of weekend mentality. Got to get the fuck out of here.
Right.
Got to go out to the countryside. Got to go out to the mountain. Got to go to the beach. Got to go to the gorge. Got to do something in nature. There's a real recharge that happens when you go do that. And I feel that anytime I walk out my front door. Hell, when I go on a walk, we live where my folks live here. There's a forest behind us, and it's a gorgeous little trail, and I'll take it. There's a basketball hoop on the other side of it, so I'll take the trail and I'll bring a basketball with me. When I get to the other side, I'll shoot hoops for a bit and get nice and sweaty. And by the time I'm back in front of my computer, I am energized and I'm ready to indulge in this pop culture craziness again.
So, you were talking about the taking the other classes and trying to get out of your comfort zone, in the terms of your education aspect. And it's not as easy to do it when you're in the professional world because, you have bills to pay and you have responsibilities, but projects are an opportunity for you to say yes to something that, if you are aware of it, will make you uncomfortable. So like, I don't know how I would, color this person's project, or I inker wouldn't know how to ink this person's thing, or a pencil, or even saying like, how would I this person is a really different kind of writer. I don't know how I would draw their stories. So is there a consciousness in your like approach, like saying like, okay, how do I like, do you do that? Like, do you say like once a year, you're going to try to find a project which is going to like challenge you in that respect, where you have to kind of like,
that's a good question, by the way. I don't consciously do that because it happens so goddamn often.
Okay.
Those kind of challenging projects fall into your lap in comic books every other project. Like the odds of you getting virtually everything being aesthetically consistent throughout your whole life in comics, extremely rare. And I would advise anyone who's trying to get into coloring, what I do when I'm approaching a new project, a new artist. Let's use Chris Mitten. Okay, Christopher Mitten. He's a great, phenomenal artist. I've worked with him on Hellboy, BPRD kind of stuff. I've worked with him on random little things here and there. He's a great artist, but he looks very different than a lot of other artists that I work with. He's very abstract. He's very kind of flow state. And when I first colored Chris, or when I color anybody's new project, and it's the first page I'm looking at, I always give myself a little more time on that page.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe double, triple, quadruple the amount of time you would normally need for a page of comics. Because the first scene, the first page of any new project, you should really spend kind of experimenting and like making marks and figuring out what works and what doesn't work. Don't be afraid to trash stuff and just restart, or to kind of erase something you just worked on for like 30 minutes. Like the first page or the first scene is always going to be that part of the book that is you finding your footing. And I don't think regular readers won't really notice. Looking at Mage, my dad's book Mage through Image, is a great example of like, the first several issues are the writer artist Pops finding his visual footing as far as storytelling goes and mark making goes. They find it pretty quickly, and that's through repetition. That's through applied effort. That's through work.
Yeah.
I come down, we come down every morning and just get to work. Like, and there is, there's a thing compelling you to go forward, which is like, if I slack on this is now a hobby. So like the aspect of like forcing yourself to work through lack of motivation, lack of inspiration, just forcing yourself to keep making marks. I know I say that term a lot, but I'll keep saying making marks. Like, don't be afraid to make marks. It's he who hesitates that will fail in the arts, and especially in comics. Mm-hmm. You need to just keep making marks and keep moving. Otherwise, you start to second guess. You start to take too much time. You start to get precious. That's a word that I hear a lot when describing poor comic art or poor efficiency in comics, is like preciousness is really sort of the downfall of efficient storytelling. Pick and choose your moments and attack them, with intent. I was saying intent a lot during that last podcast, the Drink and Draw. Intent is really important as a colorist, as a line artist, as a mark maker in comics or in the arts field, in the two-dimensional art field, because otherwise you're starting to get into almost oil painting if you're not, if you're just kind of putzing along and getting fussy with it and making tons of marks. That can lead to cool art, but it's not how comics are made. Comics are made with intent and efficient sort of ferocity, attacking the moments that matter.
Yeah, because it's interesting, because like there's a term called deliberate practice. So it's like when you're going off to do something, and I'll give you a fishing metaphor for this one.
Nice.
So for fly fishing, I used to do this as a kid with sports, and when I was struggling with my cast, I would switch to left-handed. and I would cast left-handed to force myself to understand what the mechanics I would needed to do to make the cast actually effective. So
are you ambidextrous?
I was as a kid, and then you do the school thing, and then they don't let you do both hands. They let you just do one. So I do a lot of junk with my left hand. I would not classify myself as ambidextrous, but I'm able to do things like take a fly fishing thing, or like I said to Jeff, I used to do competitive shooting, and I would switch hand to see what I need to do to try to figure out how I can. The hard part about that one is dominant eye issues, because you have a dominant eye and non-dominant eye. It's very hard to adjust on that one. But I would say, like, when you're doing, because it's real tough, because when you're doing comic books, the speed factor is so necessary that you don't have a lot of time to be really, thoughtful and zen about what you're actually doing in the terms of deliberate practice. So it's almost like when you said you have to pick your moments, like that's when you have to say, I'm going to slow down and I'm going to focus on this thing here to make this thing that's special. That's that one panel, the one panel you speak of. Here's that one panel I'm going to take the time. Panel, yeah. And it's like it's really an interesting thing, because, I know a lot of people, do warm-up drawings and cool down drawings and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's an opportunity for people to do the that type of deliberate practice. I was never very good at that. I liked it. I looked at creativity like a switch. I'm like, it's time to work. It's time to stop working. And I would do it. And I don't think that afforded me a great opportunity of growth. It just made me happier in the terms of my time of not working. But like, do you, I mean, is it like what I just described, using that one panel as the focus panel as your deliberate practice, or is it something you think you could do or find different ways of having it?
I find that mental practice that I keep talking about, being deliberate, being intent, it's something like I am always working on. Like I feel like I get lazy. I think that all artists, this happens. You're doing it for a couple hours. You start to like forget your intentionality. You start to forget about these things that I'm talking about. You kind of get into a flow state. That produces some great art. But like, it's really those intentional moments when you're truly engaged and you're focused on what's important. That's why deadlines are pretty important in comics. And I think why they have promoted some pretty great...
It's an important period.
Yeah, because they've promoted some pretty great art throughout the ages, and just in terms of comics, they allow a lot of artists to start to figure out how to strip down their mark making and their lines to an efficient minimalism that I think just makes the better art. I mean, when it comes to moving your eye through a page, through these panels, there's a lot of information going on, and the artist is not always conscious of how little time the reader spends per page, per panel. And so it's always good to like kind of stop and keep checking yourself. This is why I always take little breaks when I work. Like I can't work for like more than 2 or 3 hours without having to get up and go like outside for at least a 15-minute walk or something, because I reach a point where like I feel like, again, I'm getting kind of lazy or distracted from my goal, which is always to make like efficient mark making choices and color choices. And it's the second you kind of like, and I'm sure you've had this too, where like you reach a point where you've been making marks for like hours, and then you're like, oh wait, I just spent way too long on this one thing.
All right, dude. I was talking with Jeff Johnson on this one, and this is something like, you were talking about the flow state, and like we all want to be in the flow state. Like that's the magic zone.
Yeah, I call it the like Jimi Hendrix like.
Sure, right. Yeah, you're in the Hendrix moment, right? Yeah. But like the thing is that there's also what I call the grind state.
Right.
And you can slip right past that flow state and into the grind state, because the page ain't finished. And your mind is like, just got to keep going, just got to keep going, just got to keep going. And time will go by, and you've made probably not the greatest amount of progress that you would have hoped for. And the results may not be up to what you want. And when what you're saying about taking that time, stretching your legs, doing the whatever you need to do to kind of, recharge your brain, your energy level, whatever it is, and then
reset.
get back to it. And it doesn't take much time. I mean, you could do it in 15 minutes. It doesn't take a big thing, but like, I think we're naturally not the greatest people when it comes to time management, comic book or just creative people in general.
Humans. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's this kind of weird thing, like, because like what I notice in the comic book world from my experience of being in there and then my fellow, friends, is that our ego is so tied into the work that we're doing that we will sit there for 13 hours grinding away on a page because it's got to be perfect. It's got to be whatever. And then you said like, the reader just blasts right past all that work, hunting through the story to get to the end. And you spent, way more time on something than you should have. And then that's that you should do a good job.
Tell you, all it takes is one time of missing your deadline, having spent 13 hours on a page or whatever you just said, that like will make you check yourself so hard where you're like, oh, this is not feasible. This is, not only can I not make a living doing this, but I like can't even make a hobby doing this.
Right.
Like that's, and again, that's why comics, I just keep coming back to like, you really have to pick and choose your moments. I'm trying more and more these days to leave areas as flat as possible in the color stage that don't require attention.
Right. They don't need it.
They don't need it. I'm always trying to, when I'm looking at the whole page, I'm always looking at what looks the most awkward right now. Let's say I'm halfway done with a page. Okay. Let's say I've done half the amount of marks that I'll make by the time I'm done with the page. And there's just a big face in panel 3 or something that looks too flat, looks awkward. It needs dramatic lighting on it or something. Looks flat as hell. Looks like it needs more rendering. It does. That's what that means. It does. So like attack that moment and get it done, and then let your brain drift to the next thing that is standing out. Exactly. What is the next thing?
What's it asking for? Right? Like, what is this asking for? Yeah. Because it's the time, it's the delivery, like, because it's comic books, there's the schedule, you're talking the deadline. I mean, listen, we all love Arthur Adams, right? Art Adams is a great comic book artist. Everyone loves looking at Art Adams, and you talk about mark making. That dude makes marks, and they're very cool. Very few people do what he does, and if they do it because he did it. Like, that's just kind of how it goes. But if you're an editor and they're like, hey, here's your option. You got art as an opportunity for your penciler, or you got this guy who nails his deadlines every single month.
It's going to be a no-brainer for the editor and the publisher.
It's a no-brainer. And I'm not knocking Arthur because I love his stuff. But it's this thing where it's a business and they got to get the damn thing out. And it's not a matter of it, because like, who are we drawing it for? Are we drawing it for ourselves? Are we drawing it for our peers? Are we drawing it for the product? Like, that's like,
the answer is yes to all of them.
Right. Of course. Right.
The answer is like yes to all of them. So how can you, as a storyteller, especially a visual storyteller in comics, how can you appease all of those things? How can you appease yourself first and foremost? How can you appease the reader, the publisher, your editor, your cohorts, your peers? There's a balance, all of life is a balancing act, but being a freelance comic book artist, writer, definitely a big balancing act, having to figure out, time, like you said, time management is so crucial. 13 hours, you referenced that you said 13 hours on a page. When you said that, my head went, I would just already be like working at Walmart. Like there's no way I could possibly not only pay my bills, but just like exist in this highly competitive market if I were doing that minimal of page put out. I mean, you just I'll reference my fucking hero again, who taught me most of what I know about coloring. Dave Stewart once told me, and this was like 10 years ago, so maybe he's upped it from here, but he told me to keep pace with the amount of work he's got, he has to do at least 5 pages a day.
Crazy. Which
is crazy to me too. I can't do that.
Right.
I've done that on a deadline push, but that's for like an all-nighter sort of thing. The most pages I've ever done in a day was 8, okay, coloring.
Yeah.
And it was intense. It involved drugs in a late night. Like it wasn't like an everyday, all day routine sort of thing where I get up, walk off at 5.
No, those are phone calls. You get a phone call and then you're doing that kind of stuff. Like somebody is giving you a very sad phone call by saying, hey, we've got a problem. The schedule's changed or whatever. And then and you're at the end of the rope. You know what I mean? Like there's nobody behind.
Poor colorists, yes. Poor colorists are about as end of the rope as it gets, because a letterer, and I don't want to knock
black and white. You can do it off the pencils.
Yes, a letterer can do it off the pencils and literally like do 10 pages a day, no problem. A colorist does about as much work as a line artist, sometimes more, depending on the page, depending on what's demanded of them.
Mm-hmm.
And it can take so long to the point, and the recognition and the pay is always less too. So yeah, you really, as a colorist, you really have to figure out what is going to make your life not just a living hell.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's super tough in that respect. I was thinking, something popped in my head earlier about the deadline thing. And I think what popped in my head was Sagrada de Familia, which is the cathedral in Barcelona. Mm-hmm. They've been building it for 135 years. So like there's no deadline. They're still building it. They'll probably be still building it after we're gone. And then I think about like Notre Dame burns down a few years ago. That motherfucker is going to be up and running probably within 10 years. Like they'll have that thing rebuilt, and it's going to be great. Like it's not going to look like, like you're going to walk in there and go, wow, but like there's a deadline. There is a straight up deadline.
Yeah. I think about another good example is, if you've ever been to Ground Zero at New York, they put up that memorial so fast, right? That big square pit. They put up that thing so fast, and it's gorgeous.
It is.
And like, I don't think they could have made a better memorial for that area. It's like a perfect thing. And yeah, and it happened like you're saying, it happened fucking rapido, because
it was
government.
I was there, when it happened, and so I lived in Manhattan during that whole period. And so there was this hands-off period, like nobody touched that area down there. It was nobody goes here. Nobody has anything to do. I mean, they were cleaning it all up is really what they were up to.
Right. Yeah.
And there was real no sort of overt decision what was happening. But once that trigger was pulled, when they said, here's what we're doing, it was like in no time.
Yeah, now, like practically overnight. Like it
felt like so it. Fast. Yeah. Now I'll tell you my idea. I know that it is not nearly as deep and meaningful as the idea of what they put it there, which is great. And if you haven't seen it, please go see it, because it really will kind of open your heart up. But
it's epic, man.
Oh, it is.
It kind of pulls at the heartstrings.
It takes your heartstrings and drags them down into that pit. I mean, it is absolutely. But my idea was because this is the time when they were deciding what to do with the Yankees and Yankee Stadium. And I said, well, they should open up Yankee Stadium on that ground and put home plate as the South Tower, like right from the home plate corner. That's where you stand on home plate. And I'm like, there's your American response, to such a terrible event.
I think that's a great idea. I think that's a great idea. You know why they wouldn't do that though, because it's not somber enough.
No, it is celebratory, which is not what they were going for.
Right. Yeah.
So I guess while we're sort of in the deepity deeps here, like, how do you seek inspiration? I mean, I know that you like going outdoors, you like exercising, you love fly fishing, and those are great things. But are there other areas that you try to seek inspiration?
All over the place. Obviously, anything fiction based. I'm a fiction hound. So when it comes to storytelling, I don't usually gravitate towards nonfiction. I like some documentary stuff. I like true crime stuff. I listened to the last podcast on the left. Obviously, I just did some work with them, and I have some upcoming work with them as well. A very cool Sid and Nancy story based on the Sex Pistols and the Last Days of Sid and Nancy, with my father drawing.
That's awesome.
That'll be a very cool project. But for the most part, I'm a fiction guy. So fiction is where I draw most inspiration and where I'm always going to when I'm not working or when I am working.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an Audible hound. So
cool.
I do a lot of audiobooks. Just within the last several months, several books. I mean, I read at least a couple books a month via audiobook. These days it's a lot of horror. I also like sci-fi a lot. So like I've read almost every single Dune book, even the shitty ones.
All right. They're good. They're all good.
I love sci-fi. I love getting like, I love escapism. Escapism is a big source of inspiration for me. I think most people go towards fiction and storytelling in general because they want to escape from what's from the monotony and the boredom of their life, or perhaps the opposite, perhaps the hectic chaos of their life. Whatever the case, it's always escapism. It's always the chance to get away from your own experience and put yourself in the shoes of someone else.
Yeah.
And this is why I never taken people's advice when they give me like self-help book things like how to live your life more efficiently, that kind of stuff. Because for me, I get all of those examples and all of those lessons from fiction. Morals, the themes, the lessons that we find in the journey of characters, the consequences they face. These are all things that reflect life. Any writer is doing this to sort of represent their own reality and comment on their own reality. So it's really easy for me to escape into fiction, but also feel the connection to the writer, to the universe. So again, a lot of Audible. These days, it's been a lot of horror stuff. I could recommend some books that I think are just aces that I've read lately.
Yeah, horror give me some recs.
Oh, okay. Well, the book I'm reading right now is fucking awesome book. Stephen Graham Jones. He's phenomenal horror writer. And the book I'm reading right now is called The Only Good Indians.
Okay.
And it is such a cool book and premise about 4 Native American men who commit an atrocity on a herd of elk that are sacred. And in the aftermath, a strange entity starts to stalk and torment these men and their families over the years. And it's a very cool statement on culturalism, on tradition, on like westernization, on America. Like it's such an American novel, steeped in horror, steeped in creepiness. Oh, it's so good.
Oh, cool.
The one I read before that is called Tender is the Flesh, which is about a near future sci-fi apocalyptic sort of future where all animals are poisonous to eat for humans. So humans start to harvest humans for meat.
Cool.
And that's one of the darkest things I've ever read in my whole life. It takes the road and makes it look like a Winnie the Pooh book. Like it's so unbelievably dark. Just read another great book called Boy Parts. Eliza Clark, British author. It's her debut novel, and it's phenomenal. It's like a through the lens of a young, attractive female version of American Psycho.
Okay.
That too, really great. So yeah, a lot of Audible. I also watch a lot of TV while I work. Music, I can only ever listen to like an album or two before I'm just like, all right, time to turn on some narrative. Like I need some fiction. I need some characters.
Interesting. Okay.
I'll do podcasts. I mostly listen to Last Podcast on the Left. I just love their humor and storytelling. So I'll listen to their, and that's kind of where I get my nonfiction, my true crime stuff, my real world stuff. But I do a lot of sitcoms.
Okay.
I do a lot of sitcoms while I work. I'm always watching like Modern Family, Goldbergs, Superstore, Office, that kind of stuff. I love workplace sitcoms. I love there's a real like casual cadence that happens when that is on in the background.
Yeah.
It kind of makes you productive no matter what you're doing, whether you're making art or cooking or working out or anything. It's like there's something about a sitcom on in the background that is that is conducive to doing something else other than just focusing on it.
Because you don't have to pay attention specifically. Like they're telling you what's happening as they're doing it. I mean, it's like a Super Friends episode. You don't have to focus on it.
I say too, they're a lot like a radio show from back in the day.
Sure.
Like almost all of the information is
auditory. Yeah.
So it's really easy for me to do that. I'll rewatch shows I've already seen while I'm working. I'm about to do that with like the first season of Our Flag Means Death. So I can watch the new season of Our Flag Means Death and actually pay attention to it. So I'll rewatch whole seasons of stuff before I watch a new season. That just kind of keeps my day going while I'm working. And at night I will usually watch like a drama of some kind. I'm watching Fall of House of Usher right now. I'm watching Warrior on HBO. Warrior, for anyone who's not watching Warrior is the best show you're not watching. It is absolutely incredible. HBO, it's like Deadwood with a bunch of fighting. It's based on the writings of Bruce Lee. Incredible show.
Oh, awesome.
So I kind of draw inspiration from everywhere fictitious. And you didn't hear me mention any comic books there. I do not get to read very many comic books these days. Every now and then I'll get the chance to like sit down and actually bang out a whole graphic novel in a sitting. And that feels great and kind of like recharges my juices. But I think a lot of comic book artists and writers and stuff will tell you this, which is at the end of the day, we've been working in panels all day.
Yeah.
We've been working between the gutters all day. And so we kind of want something a little different. All of it, all storytelling helps to inform and inspire comic books. There's almost no form of fictitious storytelling that doesn't help inform our art form.
No, I totally agree. And it was the same with me. I was an avid reader. And then the minute I started working, for Marvel or DC, I just stopped reading them because I didn't have the time. I didn't have the same interest. I was focused on different things about the art form. So I would pick up things by my friends or people or creators that I really dug. If I knew somebody was making something, I'd make sure to grab it. But it wasn't. It stopped being about that. Yeah, and I mean, it's finding that thing that, and it's interesting, and it kind of ties in nicely to St. John because this is early effort for you as a writer in the realm of comics. So I mean, you're taking inspiration and you're making a thing from the inspiration in the terms of a narrative.
Yeah, with St. John, it's highly personal. I mean, I grew up in, and if your listeners could see, I'm covered in Portland merch. I love Portland. Portland is a big part of me, and I've lived in several different places. Like I said, I lived in New York for about 3 years, and Portland's just a place I keep coming back to because it's just so easy to be yourself here. There's a way of life here that it's conducive to being a freelancer. Again, the nature recharge is really nice in Oregon. You drive an hour in any direction outside Portland and you have just awesome environment, beach, desert, mountain, swamp, like everything is found in Oregon. And Portland's got a real sort of tight-knit neighborly community. I know that it has a bad rep these days because the homeless issue going on and the what the streets look like in downtown right now. But as someone who lives here, that's sort of a demonization of the outside world. Like the best kept secret is that Portland is actually still way better than all your other major cities. Still less crime than Seattle. Still less murder than wherever. It's still nothing compared to those places. So I really love Portland and getting to ground a hero in this city, getting to like explore like the areas of this city that are highly recognizable and iconic and include them, and also include the sort of like community values and like ethics that make this place tick, that make it run. Explore some of the stuff that people find so weird and daunting about Portland, and that conversely we love about Portland. Those same things that people don't like, that alienate them from this place, us locals love about this place. So getting to getting to explore that and kind of like give a voice to that. And I saw one review that it was pretty loving of our stuff. Said it's almost like a leaflet for Portland, like a travel
Sponsored
Portland
by
thing.
the Portland Council for City Growth.
Yeah, I mean, we're hoping that St. John and these issues and stuff, and the ultimate graphic novel, will collect the first 4 issues, with some bonus material at the back. We're hoping that it becomes kind of a local staple of a book. It'll be sold in all Portland Gear stores. Portland Gear's getting a new store in the airport right next to the Travel Oregon store, so it's all just the Made in Oregon store. Mm-hmm. So it's all like keeping it all like very within the family, localized stories, localized people, localized icons, symbols, ideas, again, ethics, values. And John is a very altruistic kind of hero. He's definitely not our nuanced character. In fact, the story is from the perspective of an outsider, mm-hmm. a journalist from New York, who is visiting to sort of cover the oddness of this guy in this town, in this city, what's going on. And she slowly kind of starts to fall in love with the whole idea of it all.
Right.
And that's kind of me. That's kind of anyone who's slowly fallen in love with Portland. I grew up on the outskirts of Portland,
right.
A town called West Lynn. It's about 30 minutes south of Portland, driving time, 20 to 30. And so for me, it was always like, we always drove into the town. Me and my friends, come the weekend or come, after hours, we were driving into the city because we wanted to be a part of it. We wanted to be a part of what was going on there. And the art scene going on there. There's some really, really wonderful events that happen in downtown Portland. The Blues Fest in the summer is just a phenomenal event. It caps, it's like a 5-day thing, 4 or 5 day thing, I think. And it caps off with a huge firework display for the 4th of July in downtown, right on the water. You're watching blues music on this grassy hill. That's the waterfront area, bridges everywhere, and tons of people and food and good vibes. And then it gets dark and they light off fireworks. It's just, it's a great place. Portland's a great place.
Sounds horrible, Brennan. Why? This sounds terrible.
Yeah.
Well, I think if I could sum up the hook is the cynical New Yorker comes into this looking for the angle, like what's the angle, and finds that there is no angle, that it's a continual circle, and like this character is just a part of this continuum. And I think that's kind of it was an interesting way to start off a story.
That framework was borrowed from a lot of books that my dad has written. I mentioned Sandman Mystery Theater earlier with Teddy with Steve Siegel. That's a good example of a character who the main character is actually the love interest, who it's narrated by her, and it's all about her peeking in on this guy's world. When you do this with a vigilante like this, and John's not really a vigilante, he never really fights anyone.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't fight crime necessarily. We keep describing it as an environmental disaster book more than anything, like an adventure environmental disaster thing. He's usually helping out because of climate change.
Right.
But this framework, this narrative framework, Pop has done it on most of his shadow books too, narrated by Margot Lane. So instead of, being narrated by the shadow, who's a mysterious figure, if you have it narrated by the love interest who's starting to peek in on and understand his lifestyle, you get to slowly reveal these things. You can hold cards close to your chest. When your main superhero is narrating the story, they'll just tell you anything that's going on. You know, I'm limited in this way. I can't solve this. I can solve that. Blah, blah, blah. This is my power. This isn't my power. But when you have an outsider peeking in on it, trying to understand it, you can drag it out longer. Mm-hmm. You can also give that character that character suddenly the hero becomes your static rock. They go through less change than your narrator, and the narrator is infected by or affected by
Sure.
the events and the actions of the hero.
Yeah.
I keep saying in our story, her name is Tori Slate, the journalist from New York, and I keep calling her, she's the Nick Carraway to our Gatsby.
Right. Yeah.
You know, we know St. John, we know this hero, altruistic do-gooder Boy Scout. We don't know quite as well this chip on her shoulder journalist. She's kind of like Lois Lane, but like without a home base as solid as New York. She's trying to figure out her life. Things are starting to shift for her, and that was really fun. That idea was one of the first things that made Dan and I go, that's how to make this interesting. That's how to make this more than just product placement. That's how to make this something that actually has weight and meaning and value and real substance and ethos and pathos and all the stuff you want baked into a good comic story.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's good. And I mean, I think it's a very different point of view. And I think one of the points that you were calling about, like the point of view way of telling the story, is that if you make the protagonist, the narrator, well, everybody becomes a supporting character.
Yes.
But in this model, you sort of have two protagonists. You know, we have the marquee player, you know, in the ball cap, in the mask, who were all kind of, you know, okay, who is this character? What is this character doing? But then we have this other protagonist who is in here, and we need to know who they are and what they're doing as well. I mean, like it's because we're far less interested in the supporting characters because they're away from the action when the protagonist, like, he shows up. You know what I mean? We're with her, and then he shows up, so we have to bond with her. So I think it's an interesting model to kind of like to approach for a story. So, bravo.
Yeah, and it's like you said, you know, when the hero is the protagonist, when the main character is the strongest, most interesting guy in the room,
right?
Everyone else is far less interesting. One thing that Dan and I talk a lot about these days is that the very human element that was inherent in comics has been kind of lost these days. You know, Robin gets killed by the Joker. He's then a villain. Batman's battling his old ward that's a villain, and then a villain and a villain and a villain. When is the last time Batman actually saved like a real person? When was the last time that Superman was involved in just saving someone that like was gonna jump off a roof? There's a great version of that in All-Star Superman.
Sure.
But you know what I'm talking about here, where like the very human element is lost because it starts to become Greek myth. You have epic, superpowered figures that are only involved in the theater of their intertangled, you know, actions, and everyone else falls to the wayside. And that's just not I don't find that very relatable. I've never found that very relatable. You know, when you get into some continuity heavy superhero fiction, it starts to lose its grounding in reality, and as a result it loses its relatability to us humans who are grounded in reality.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, it goes back to what we were talking about in the coloring aspect, is that they become set dressing. You know, and what you know, like the key is, how do you make this all contextual? And I think, you know, I mean, this is probably the nature of things in general, is that every, you know, as time passes, we just keep turning the dials up. So we hit a little more color saturation, a little brighter, a little louder, a little whatever more, and to the point where you get to the point where you go, oh, well, I'm afraid of having this be a simple story of Superman saving a person from a car accident or whatever really pedestrian sort of event happening, not for that individual, of course, because it's life and death for them, but it's not saving the world. It's not stopping Lex Luthor or whatever the thing is. And I think it's kind of an interesting thing that, like, you know, whenever every so often we get these stories where they pull back, you know, the writer has the opportunity to sort of pull back, shift the camera a bit, and give us a slightly skewed point of view from what we're used to. The readers typically respond in like, oh my God, this is amazing, because they didn't know that they would love to have this particular piece of sushi. Like they've
been so overly saturated with tuna
Yeah. Or hamburgers, you know?
Yeah, that they had no idea that they were actually secretly missing this other thing.
Right. Yeah.
That the new show My Adventures with Superman comes to mind. That's a good example of like shows that like deal with very, you know, human problems. You have this super being, but
Mhm.
he's a fulcrum for actual human drama and consequence. Consequence is a word that like you don't feel as much in modern myth and comics because it feels like everyone is immune to not only death but immune to consequence. No
Right.
longer like when Uncle Ben dies, it
Right.
doesn't mean as much as it used to. So I'm always looking for stuff like that that has that human element. I think a great show that does that quite well is Avatar: The Last Airbender. If you've
Okay.
ever seen that, that show has a really great grasp on how to include little episodic, very down to earth human moments while always being conscious of this growing epic myth and this story that eventually is like Lord of the Rings by the end. But for the first plotting 20 episodes or so, it's Aang and his group arriving at a random town and solving that town's problems. So you get to meet all these like very real people and the lives they live and the struggles they experience. And you relate to those people. You don't
Mhm.
relate. Superman's not that relatable. He's a fucking alien. He's a superpowered alien. He's
Right.
the guy that's supposed to come solve all the relatable issues
Well,
that real people are
he's
facing.
the ex machina. You know what I mean? He's the
Yes,
power of
yes,
God, and that's,
yes.
you know, and it's an you know, which I think lots of conversations of these end up boiling down to Superman, you know, or Superman and Batman, and
Yeah, I'm using them because
because
they're
the big
staples.
brushes. It's a big brush to paint, and we all know, as we said earlier, everybody knows who Superman is. Well, how was the experience for writing for you? I mean, what, like, for you, like, did you just like go, I love this, or this is fucking hard, or like, what's the verdict?
It is definitely hard, especially if you don't practice as much as I do, and that's why I listen to a lot of Audible these days, is because I love writing. I think if you're trying to write comic books, you have to read prose novels.
Oh yeah,
If you're not reading prose and you're trying to write comics, you are not doing your homework, and you're gonna fail. You need that vocabulary, and you need that level of expertise that comes with real prose novels.
yeah.
But writing St. John has been really fun. About month or two before that, I actually got to write a short story. I think I might post this today actually for like Halloween season. I got to write a short story for the last podcast on the left, guys, who I said I love so much. That's a werewolf story,
Cool.
all about government testing on people. It's like MK Ultra.
Hmm.
Uh, it's all about the government testing on people, and it triggers the dormant genes of a werewolf in one of them, and there's a big slaughter, and it was a lot of fun. That was the first project I got to write, draw, paint, letter, format, everything. I did the whole thing. It's only 6 pages long, but I got to do that as sort of a little, you know, yeah, before doing St. John, so that really helped. But then St. John has been a very unique process of writing because Scotty and I, when we write St. John, one of us kind of comes up with the larger beats. I've done it for the most part on issue 1 and 2, like the story beats, and then he and I will both kind of like come in for dialogue,
Hmm.
and we do the dialogue in a face chat, like you and I are doing here, where we literally go panel by panel and decide like what's the best bit of
You
dialogue
act it
here.
out.
We knock it out, and
Yeah.
it's a matter of bouncing ideas back and forth, and that too, like coloring we talked about earlier, like all collaborative efforts, you got to check that ego at the fucking door. If you don't, you will your project will suffer. You need to be willing to put an idea out there that you think is strong, that the response is not what you hoped for, and then you realize that it wasn't as strong. I think the most important thing is that people's reactions to your art are true. They happen.
Right.
How you choose to change and adjust the art based on those, Bill Hader had a really great quote that Dan and I love to refer to, where it was like, when somebody tells you that something isn't working in your script, they're right.
Yeah.
But then when they tell you how to fix that part, they're wrong.
Yeah.
Their reaction to that being a weak part of the script is a true reaction.
Yep.
They're the audience. If they didn't respond to that moment, that means you didn't connect. But don't listen to them on how to fix it. That's on you to figure out how to fix. But always listen to where the criticism lies. I think in your script, if someone points to, if you're asking for criticism, especially, and they point to a scene, that scene needs correcting, or a line that line needs changing. There's just something honest and genuine about somebody's reaction to your story that shouldn't be ignored. And that's just all ego.
Yeah. So two things to think about in that regard. One, see how this settles with you in the terms of framing. It's not criticism what you're seeking. You're seeking feedback.
Yeah. Yeah.
Criticism frames it to the person that they need to say something. Feedback is, the Geiger counter. And one of the Geiger counter, or some of the Geiger counter rules that I always seek when I send my prose out to my readers for their feedback, I want to know what works and doesn't work, what is clear and what is unclear, and what they want more of and what they want less of. And those are kind of the frameworks that I would want to know. And I want to hear the negatives far more than I want to hear the positives, because at least I can ignore the positives if time is of an issue. But positives are great because you get to say, oh, okay, this is what they're responding to. And they want more of this kind of thing. So maybe it's a way you describe something. Maybe it's an action that a character takes. Whatever that thing is, it's great to know. But when they say, I had no idea what was happening here, you want to make sure that you don't have that. Now, it's not across the board. Some people aren't attentive readers. Some people aren't, whatever the thing is, everyone's attention slips at times. So you can't take all of it as this is cut in stone, but you have to be attentive to all that feedback, because that's where like you said, you have to make these changes. You have to do them. And once again, yeah, you're right. It's not their responsibility to come up with the answers for you. Write your own goddamn story. So it's a big thing to kind of, and I think it's great that you're taking it in there, but you also grew up in a house where creativity was what was, paying for the food on the table at times. So you have to go well, somebody knows how to take some criticism or some feedback or whatever, or give it. And you learn that it's an important thing.
Yeah. And like you were saying, I agree. Both are helpful, but affirmation is far less helpful than criticism, and I would say more than even feedback, like what I'm looking for when I give someone an early script or an early sample of my work is I'm looking for a reaction.
Yeah.
What is their gut reaction? What's the first thing that they say or think? If they look at something and they say, is he holding a shovel? And you're like, no, he's not holding a shovel. Then you didn't convey the information correctly.
Totally.
Something was lost in translation there. To you, you've been looking at it a long time. It looks like a guy's holding a shovel, but maybe to them it doesn't. So you gotta think about that and change it up.
Okay, there's a couple of things. You said one thing the other day, which I want to bring into here because it attributes to writing, and I think it also attributes to coloring in the respect of how it affect you. And I don't know if it was based off of the night scene turned to a day scene on Jeff's cityscape, but the point is that time is a huge important thing. So when you're writing something, let the person who's going from that point of view know what time it is, because the penciler needs to know, if you're the writer or if you're the artist, the penciler needs to know from the writer what time it is, and the colorist needs to know what time it is. But if you are the writer and you're writing a story that takes place over time, it's really good to put the time in there for yourself to understand how long it takes to get from A to B to C. They're simple, stupid things, but when you don't do it, it doesn't really benefit you. But if you do it, it's really, it's kind of a game changer.
Yeah, when Scotty and I write St. John, we're extremely conscious every time we start a new scene what time of day it is, because I think that time of day also lends itself to theme and motif.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a scene that's supposed to be dark and foreboding, it should be kind of at night or something like that, or raining. You want the environment and the lighting to reflect what's going on narratively.
Yeah.
And the visuals are always meant to help push the narrative in a comic book. So it's important. I mentioned this earlier too in the last in the drink and draw. There is like, read the script, read the damn script. I think a lot of colorists, a lot of artists even will like kind of read the script or skim the script and think they got. It's like, read the script once through, and then read the script again while you're working on it.
Sure,
It seriously takes no time.
I used to take notes. So I take the script and I would know like what it was. I would annotate, on the page. I'm like, okay, this one needs to have X, Y, and Z. Have to put X, Y, and Z, and that way it just kept me sort of honest as a storyteller, like what has to happen here.
And that's the advantage. That's the advantage of coloring a book that you are also write. Is I just know it instinctually.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's the cheat code, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing is like, going back to that feedback early, aspect when you're a writer sharing something, because let's have writer talk here with the colorist. No, I'm kidding. Find out from those people that you're handing this stuff off to, ask them when they got engaged. Like, because you may think it's page 1, but it could be page 3 for them. And that's like a great thing for you to know, like, maybe I need to get to page 3 sooner, and then I get to do more in other parts of the book. Like, how do you because engagement is the key to, especially for issue 1s, like you want your readers to go, I'm totally engaged with this character or whatever the story is to what's happening. And that's a super important thing. So, pass that one off as another, a little bit of wisdom.
Yeah. With St. John, the first issue, we really wanted it to feel very episodic, because it had to be almost like a series of vignettes around Portland to describe not only the 2 main characters and what they're going through, but to describe the environment. In St. John, Portland is almost a character in and of itself. Sort of like how movies like Chinatown are all about like the place as well. Like we wanted the place to have like value and substance and almost be a character, something to be studied, something to be understood and nuanced. And so to show that in the first issue, it had to be little vignettes. The second issue, which we're wrapping up now here, is quite different. The second issue is almost like and we're doing this is a very seasonal book. So St. John issue 1 takes place in the fall, issue 2 winter, 3 spring, 4 summer. Okay. The second issue is a bit of a snowpocalypse. A big snowfall comes and hits Portland and kind of shuts everything down. If you've ever been in Portland in winter, you know that we're not really equipped for such things. And so when it does happen, as infrequent as it happens, it does occasionally happen. I want to say 2 or 3 years ago, it happened really bad. And our house here in the burbs lost power for about 5 days.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
And like I had to keep a fire going upstairs just to keep the house warm. One morning I woke up and the toilet was starting to freeze. The water, like it was getting that cold in the house.
A little crunchy. Yeah.
And so our second issue is all about a deep freeze, and it's sort of one big journey, one big adventure. Like I keep saying, it's kind of like Balto. If you ever seen Balto, the husky Disney story, it's like a journey through the harsh conditions of winter, but it's one sustained sort of journey, one sustained storyline. As opposed to the first issue, which is very vignette. And it's like you're saying, that first issue needs to be that. It needs to have a number of things to introduce you to all the subject matter going on, the vibes, themes, the motifs, characters.
That's cool, man. I like that. You're busy, dude. And let's also not forget one of the reasons we're here as well is the Rogue's Kingdom. Mm-hmm. And so they're probably like, by the time this airs, halfway through the campaign. So I'm going to predict that the campaign's funded by this point. That's just me,
It's gotta be.
extrapolating here. And I guess, people can listen to other things or watch other things and hear you say it, but like, how exciting is it to work with, on James's work, on James's writing, who's just one of the greats as a writer, and get to work on Jeff's crazy drawing. His line work is nuts in this.
Yeah, I've actually known James since I was a wee tyke as my dad's weird British friend. So, it's so it's fun to work with James because I've known him for so long. And Jeff I barely know at all, but I love working on his line work. I think that and I don't really work on a lot of guys who look like Jeff, their line work. He's got his stuff looks phenomenal, but it's a little more detail heavy than I usually work on.
Yeah.
A little bit more hatchy, a little bit more dense detail wise. And so it's really fun to work on his stuff because I really get to kind of indulge in my rendering and my fantasy. All these lessons I've been talking about for coloring, I don't have to think about them quite as much with Jeff's work because I'm really trying to render these environments very impressionistic, very fantasy heavy. I'm thinking about Frazetta. I'm thinking about N.C. Wyeth. I'm thinking about any of these turn of the century fantasy illustrators and painters that I love so much, impressionists. So working with Jeff is really cool because it's very different than working with other people. As a colorist, that's kind of part of the fun. If only the pay and the recognition reflected the amount of fun, because the fun is that you get to work on a variety of stuff. It never really gets boring.
Yeah.
Right now, for example, I'm working on four different stories right now, and each one, five different stories, and each one is like vastly different than the other one. Aesthetics. Drawing wise, two of the things I'm working on are my dad's, and even those are about as different as you could get. One is a Grendel story, one is a Sex Pistols story that is like raunchy as hell. So many dicks, so many knives, so much depravity, and very triple X.
Yeah.
And so that's really fun to work on because I'm applying a completely different rendering style and palette to that as well. I'm going with almost like a sepia grayscale for everything, plus an intensely hot yellow and pink that
cool.
punctuates it like a Sex Pistols album cover, or like a punk poster from that British new wave or British.
You can only afford two colors. Pick them. Yeah.
Yeah, and there might be a moment where I add a third one here and there, maybe colors that immediately come to mind for that punk rock scene would be like a intense teal. Not very many blues. Like when you think about those album covers, there's not very many blues. It's usually hot colors.
Yep.
Hot colors that are sitting on top of muted colors. A lot of scratchy white. So one thing I'm doing on that project is occasionally when I want a panel to pop, I'm actually going over the line art and adding a scratchy white border to certain panels to make it look very punk rock. That's cool. And that's a technique I've never done before. Something I discussed with my dad, and we just decided that would look cool here and there. So I'm doing it here and there. So yeah, the fun of coloring, I think, is the variety, the sheer variety of work, especially if you're like me and you keep finding and working with new artists, which I somehow, I mean, not somehow, I do that because I've grown up in comics. I have a nice network, with my father being who he is, and also attending conventions literally my entire life. I have a nice network of people who know me and can refer to me. Tim Sale was like a no-brainer when I started coloring for him, because, Dave Stewart colored for my dad. I took over for him. There was a similar aesthetic going on. I sampled something for Tim and he loved it. And then boom, I'm coloring everything Tim does, right. Or did, RIP. And so, and I got a few guys off of Tim. I did a little thing, Walt Simonson Superman piece one day randomly, per recommended from Tim. All these things kind of come in recommended because colorists are sort of a last minute, like we were saying earlier, a last rung on the ladder sort of position. And often you're called upon because you are someone who can get the job done faster than the line artist can.
Yeah. Well, the nature of the business, I guess. Yeah, man. It's great. It's great. It's great. You're so busy. I mean, it was funny because last we spoke, it's kind of, you were literally locked in your apartment because of the pandemic. And, I don't think you were as busy coloring a lot of people at the time. You were sort of doing different stuff, and you were doing some really great paintings on Instagram of, TV shows you were watching. You would do the Korean horror, like that period Korean horror zombie show.
Kingdom is one of the best shows.
It's great, but you're doing some great paintings from that stuff, and but then you have subsequently gotten a lot busier. And
that was all commission work. Actually, that whole period was commission work because I was working on I was coloring 2 different books at that point, and they both got put on pause when the pandemic hit.
Right.
And they were put on pause for like 8 months or so.
Yeah.
And as a result, I had like 8 months of just sitting around doing nothing. So I decided to open up my commission list, and I had a number of people hit me up, and I really got to like get down on my painting then, which was good because great. Now I'm getting the opportunity to do variant covers. I'll be doing the variant painted covers for my dad's next Grendel series, for example.
Mm-hmm. And you're doing Rogue's Kingdom. Are you doing a cover for Rogue's Kingdom or a piece for the?
It's a variant cover for Rogue's Kingdom. Yep. It's for the $20 backers of the Kickstarter. And I've done a number of painted covers for other things. A couple of like prose novels. Actually, people hit me up for like covers for those.
Sweet.
And it's been a nice way for me to kind of make marks and experiment with how I would want to do this stuff. Again, to any of your listeners who want to like read what a fully painted story of mine looks like, I'll just post that today. I'm just going to post that today midway through October here for the Halloween season. That is a fully flushed out painted story by me. A good way to see like what my work looks like when I fully paint comic books just by myself and write by myself.
I can't wait to see it. Dude, I have messaged you plenty of times saying how cool it is when I see you do the oh, before we go, I'm going to give you a confession. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'll play the priest.
Almost a year ago, I was working on a project, and I had to send an email to a client, and one of the people in the project, this is, big dozens of people, so an email chain with, probably like 14 people on it. And we have a Brenna we work with. So I type in BRENNA, but yours came up, and I didn't think, just hit enter because I saw something fill in the thing, off it goes. And about a week or so later, this email pops in the inbox saying, please take me off of this email list. I color comics. That was you. It was so bad. I'm like, oh, poor Brennan has been dealing with these stupid email requests from a client for the last however long it was before you finally broke.
Oh, that's funny. I don't remember. It's just one of the spam things.
I felt so bad. So I had to confess that I apologize. It's just
that's funny.
The keystroke error just had you sitting in the middle of email hell. So
yeah, my name's pretty rare. So are the Brennas. I've only ever met a couple of Brennas and Brennans in my life.
Yeah,
pretty rare.
Yeah, no, you're a rarity, my friend. Well, keep being busy, my man. It was great to catch up here. I know that we got to chat a little on Friday, but this was nice to actually spend a little time.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on, man. Like you said, it was nice to kind of get into the weeds of my work and what I do. Again, I'll post that story for you and your listeners here on my Facebook and my Instagram. And I'll send you that. It's probably going to go live tomorrow, honestly. The Rogue's Kingdom cover that I'm working on right now. So.
Right on. Well, the links to all your social media stuff will be in the description, so they'll be able to find you, and then they'll be able to track that down. Yeah, man, can't wait
Excellent.
to see. I honestly, I can't wait to see the this story that you did all the work on. I can't wait to see you and your pop's stuff, because hell, I've been reading his stuff for a long time.
The horror story that I wrote myself, is called The Edgewood Massacre.
Cool.
And it features in a beautiful edition of the last comic book on the left from the guys who put out the last podcast on the left. They do a biannual or something like that book, and it's inside of that, printed out a beautiful, like, oversized sort of thing on this nice paper. I was so happy to see how nicely it printed.
Oh, cool, man! I really can't wait to check this stuff out. Yeah. Anything else you want to add to this before we?
Please pick up St. John issue 1, issue 2 coming soon. Please pick up Grendel, Devil by the Deed Masters Edition in November. An absolutely gorgeous hardback in a felt slipcase with black gilded pages. Beautiful.
Wow.
Beautiful. I think it's the prettiest looking book I've ever worked on. And I want to say it's like my 15th full length graphic novel I've worked on. So
wow.
please go get that book. And then I have cool stuff coming out after that. Rogue's Kingdom, the Kickstarter is live. Please go back our Kickstarter. And then I have a cool Sid and Nancy Sex Pistols story coming out soon as well. So there you go.
Crushing it, my friend. Crushing it. Yeah, man. See you, buddy.
Appreciate it, Alex.